Would you be willing to pay a tourism tax to visit locations in your own country? Well, if you're Scottish, that's exactly what could happen, providing the new Scottish motorhome tax becomes a thing. And in this video, we're going to discuss that in a lot more detail. What is this Scottish tourism tax? Where's it come from? Is it new? Is it not? Who's going to be affected? Well, essentially, the tourism tax has been discussed for several years. The Scottish Government agreed in principle to allow local authorities to introduce such a tax, and the Highland Council are very much pushing to do so. So from what I've found, the Highland Council have a budget gap of around about £61.7 million. So potentially that could be one of the key reasons as to why they're looking to implement it. But what are they actually looking to implement? What are the things that they're proposing? Well, let's go over that. So first off is a potential per night charge. So most proposals suggest a per night charge for each tourist stay in commercial accommodation, things like hotels, B&Bs, and possibly including overnight parking areas used by motorhomes. This is the most commonly suggested model, which mirrors tourist taxes implemented in other European cities. It kind of does and it kind of doesn't, and I'll explain a little bit more about what you actually get in these other European cities later in the video. It's been proposed on like a fixed rate or a sliding scale. So the sort of fixed rate is typically ranging between £1 to £2 per person per night. Others suggest sliding scales based on accommodation type or price, which could potentially adjust the fee based on the season or the duration of the stay. The exemptions and caps proposals often include exemptions for certain types of visitors, such as children, students, or those traveling for medical reasons. Additionally, a cap on the number of nights charged per continuous stay has been suggested to avoid disproportionately affecting longer stays. The revenue allocation, there's a strong emphasis on transparency regarding how the collected funds would be used. Proposals generally specify that revenue should be reinvested in local infrastructure, environmental conservation, and enhancing tourist services and amenities. Implementation flexibility, recognising the diverse nature of tourist destinations within Scotland. Some proposals have advocated for local authorities to have the flexibility to tailor the tax to their specific needs and circumstances. This could include varying the rate or the application of the tax seasonally or by area. Now, before I cover that and go into that in a little bit more detail, if you are planning a road trip to Scotland, whether that be somewhere like the Isle of Arran, whether it's somewhere like Harris, whether it's the NC 500 or the Ultimate Scottish Road Trip, or if you're looking for something a little bit more historic like the Borderlands, we have travel guides available for all of them in paperback and ebook. We also have instant guides available which cover all of these destinations that are mobile optimized PDF guides, quick access guides, and we've got a bundle of all 7 of them guides currently available for the small price of £6. That's 85 pence per guide. They're all available at the link in the description. So a lot of the information that we could find seems to insist that similar taxes are applied in other European countries. And well, they kind of are, but they kind of not. So if we use France as an example, which is kind of one of the places that they're trying to liken it to, France has got local taxes that apply to motorhomes when they stay in designated camping areas that are known as airs. Now, to anyone that's never been to France in a van like us, you might be wondering what an air is. Well, an air is a designated area specifically equipped to accommodate motorhomes and camper vans. The facilities can vary, but they typically include allocated bays for camper vans and motorhomes that are accessible and large enough to accommodate these vehicles, waste disposal facilities, water supply, electrical hookup, picnic areas and restrooms, and finally, a lot of airs also have security features like lighting, and some even have surveillance to make sure that the people staying there are nice and safe. Now, at this point, it was hard to find anything concrete, but in a lot of them, there's ideas, but nothing to specifically say these services will be provided for this extra charge. So it doesn't look likely that that's going to be the case everywhere. And even if it is, there's a lot of questions around that. Like, when will it be built? What will be built? What will be provided? And where will that be provided in the first place? So there are a lot of things to consider if this is implemented. And I do want to hear your opinion. I want to get a conversation going to find out, how do you feel about this? If you are Scottish, because that is one of my main things. Like, if you are Scottish, how do you feel about potentially being charged a tourism tax to visit somewhere in your own country? I'm not sure how I would feel about that in England, if I'm honest. And for me, I would ask as well, if there is any infrastructure changes, so if anything's being built, would they be done first? Because if we look at the store project on the Isle of Skye, to increase the car park in size, add a chemical toilet disposal point, and then to widen the path. It took 4 years. Now, even if you take off COVID's year, so it's still 3 years just for that. And then not only that, it's not like it hasn't then been charged to everyone, because that car park in itself costs more than twice as much as any other car park to stay at, not overnight, just to park at, on the whole island. So it's not cheap whatsoever. So would that be a thing? How would they sort of implement all of that? And another thing, where does the money actually go? I know it was mentioned earlier, but does it stay within that area, and is it exclusively spent on tourism related upgrades? Because if that's kind of what it is, and it's to protect areas from tourism impact, is that kind of what the money should be going to? Because for me, if we take the NC 500 as an example, the Highland Council played a huge part in implementing the NC 500. It was a project that was aimed to bring tourism to an area that desperately needed it. The project worked, all these tourists poured in, but now they were pouring into an area with literally no infrastructure, no road development, and no way of coping with the quantity of tourism that it actually brought. So now you've got a council now pushing for a tourism tax because of the impact of tourism in an area that they encouraged and promoted in the first place. Seems a little bit odd. And probably the biggest question, and the last question I want to ask, is how will this affect campsites? So to me, what I would say is, a lot of people visit campsites because they're not 100% sure on what the sort of legalities are in wild camping. Now, say there's some of these little park ups that are now authorised. You can park there, and there's a website on the Highland Council or something that shows you can stay in these campsites or park ups. Let's just say that there's a 1% drop in people visiting campsites because now there's little park ups that they can stay in the middle of nowhere, which is kind of what a lot of people like doing in Scotland. So if we use Visit Scotland stats, there was 4.95 million overnight stays in campsites during 2023. A 1% drop means there's 49,500 less nights booked at campsites. Assuming an average cost of £25 per night, that's £1.237 million less spent at campsites just in fees, never mind whatever they spend in shops and any other things that's on the campsite itself. If their visitor levy was, say, £1 per person per night, presuming there's 2 people in the van or whatever, that works out at about 100 grand a year more that the council would make at the cost of about 1.2 million to the campsite owners. So, like I say, there's a lot to consider, and it is in a proposal phase, so it's not like it's set and it's going to go now and it's happening next week or anything like that. But it is something that I think that we need to talk about. How do you feel about it? How would you implement it if it was a thing that you have to bring in the extra revenue? What would you do? What is there to consider? Should you maybe look at promoting local businesses rather than spending on trying to make the councils more money? What would you do? It's all part of a conversation. Let us know in the comments below. And if you're wanting to listen to more in-depth talks about this kind of thing, we have the Just Loans podcast available on this YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and all the other podcast providers. And also make sure you are subscribed to this channel, and if there is any additional updates, we'll make sure you're made aware of them as soon as we hear about them.